A little girl screamed, "Daddy, that's my brother!" The millionaire froze and collapsed in tears. The autumn air carried a crisp coolness as David Harrison walked through Lincoln Park, his 8-year-old daughter Emma's small hand tucked safely in his own. Golden leaves drifted down from the oak trees, carpeting the walking paths with nature's confetti. It was their Saturday tradition, a peaceful morning walk, followed by hot chocolate at the park cafe. Just the two of them. David treasured these moments more than any business deal or corporate achievement. After losing his wife Sarah in a car accident 3 years ago, Emma had become his entire world. Her bright green eyes and infectious laugh were the only things that could chase away the shadows that still haunted their big, empty house. "Daddy, can we feed the ducks today?" Emma asked, skipping slightly as they walked toward the pond. Her dark hair bounced with each step, and she wore her favorite purple jacket, the one with butterfly patches that Sarah had sewn on before she died. "Of course, sweetheart." David smiled, reaching into his coat pocket for the bag of breadcrumbs they always brought. "But remember what we learned about sharing with all the ducks, not just the pretty ones." Emma nodded solemnly. This was an important lesson to her. Fairness and kindness to everyone, even the smaller, shyer ducks that often got pushed aside by the bigger ones. As they approached the pond, David noticed it was busier than usual for a Saturday morning. Several families were scattered around the water's edge, children laughing and parents chatting while watching their little ones play. The scene filled him with a bittersweet warmth, joy at seeing Emma happy, but sadness at the reminder of what their own family was missing. Near the far side of the pond, a young woman sat on a bench with a boy who appeared to be about 10 years old. The child was thin and pale, wearing clothes that looked well-worn but clean. He sat very still, staring at the water with an intensity that seemed unusual for a child his age. "That boy looks sad," Emma observed, following David's gaze. "Can we go say hello?" David hesitated. Emma had always been drawn to other children, especially those who seemed lonely or left out. It was one of the things he loved most about her compassionate heart, but it also worried him. The world could be complicated, and he didn't want her kindness to put her in difficult situations. "Maybe we should just focus on the ducks today, Em," he said gently. But Emma was already tugging on his hand, her mind made up. "Please, Daddy, he looks like he needs a friend." As they walked around the pond toward the bench, David got a clearer look at the woman and child. The woman appeared to be in her early 20s, with tired eyes and the kind of careful posture that suggested someone carrying heavy responsibilities. She was speaking softly to the boy, but he seemed lost in his own world, unresponsive to her gentle words. "Hi," Emma called out cheerfully as they approached. "I'm Emma, and this is my daddy. Would you like to help us feed the ducks?" The young woman looked up with surprise, then smiled warmly. "That's very kind of you. I'm Lisa, and this is—" She paused, placing a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. "This is Michael." David studied the boy more closely and felt something stir in his chest, a strange recognition he couldn't quite place. Michael had dark hair similar to Emma's, and when he briefly glanced up, David caught a glimpse of green eyes that seemed hauntingly familiar. "Michael's been having a tough time lately," Lisa explained quietly. We're new to the area, and he's still adjusting." Emma immediately sat down on the grass in front of the bench, pulling out the bag of breadcrumbs. "It's okay to be sad sometimes," she told Michael with the wisdom that only children seem to possess. "I was really sad when my mommy went to heaven, but feeding the ducks always makes me feel a little better." For the first time, Michael looked directly at her. His green eyes were so striking, so familiar, that David felt his breath catch. There was something about this child that pulled at memories he couldn't quite grasp. "Would you like to throw some bread with me?" Emma asked, holding out a handful of crumbs to Michael. Slowly, hesitantly, Michael reached out and took the breadcrumbs. As he did, David noticed a small scar on the boy's wrist, a thin, crescent-shaped mark that made his heart skip a beat. "Michael, how old are you?" David found himself asking, his voice slightly strained. "He's 10, Lisa answered when Michael remained silent. "He'll be 11 in December." December. David's hands began to shake slightly. He looked more closely at Michael's face, studying the shape of his nose, the set of his jaw, the way his hair fell across his forehead. The resemblance to Emma was striking, but more than that. "Lisa," David said carefully, "can I ask, is Michael adopted?" Lisa's face immediately became guarded. "Why do you want to know?" "Daddy?" Emma looked up from where she was now sitting. Beside Michael, both children tossing breadcrumbs to the eager ducks. "Why do you sound funny?" David's mind was racing. The timeline, the age, the scar, those unmistakable green eyes that were exactly like Emma's, exactly like Sarah's had been. "I'm sorry," he said to Lisa, his voice growing more urgent. "I don't mean to pry, but where was Michael born?" Lisa stood up protectively. "I think maybe we should go, Michael, come on." But as she reached for Michael's hand, Emma suddenly gasped. She had been looking back and forth between Michael and her father, her young mind making connections that adults sometimes missed. "Daddy," she said loudly, her voice filled with excitement and confusion. "Look at his eyes. Look at his scar." Michael looked up at the commotion, and in that moment, with the afternoon sun hitting his face just right, David saw it clearly. The child he had searched for, grieved for, given up hope of ever finding. "Daddy, that's my brother!" Emma screamed, her voice carrying across the park. David's world tilted, his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the bench, tears streaming down his face. The words he had longed to hear for 10 years but never dared hope he would. They hung in the air like a prayer answered. 10 years ago, Sarah had been pregnant with twins, but complications during delivery had resulted in an emergency C-section, and in the chaos that followed, they had been told that one of the babies, a boy, had died. David had been so focused on Sarah's critical condition and caring for newborn Emma that he hadn't questioned the hospital's explanation. They had trusted the medical staff, grieved their lost son, and moved forward with their lives. But looking at Michael now, David knew with absolute certainty that their son hadn't died. Somehow, through error or intention, he had been taken from them. "Is this true?" Lisa whispered, her face pale. "Are you saying that Michael is your son?" David couldn't speak through his tears, but he nodded frantically. Emma had moved closer to Michael, studying his face with the intensity only children possess. "You have Mommy's eyes," she told him softly, "and Daddy's chin, and that scar. I have one too, see?" She showed him a small mark on her own wrist from the same birth complication. "We're twins." Michael stared at Emma, then at David, then back at Emma. For the first time since they had met him, he spoke. "I always felt like something was missing," he said quietly. "Like there was supposed to be someone else." Lisa sank onto the bench beside David, her own eyes filling with tears. "I work for social services," she explained, her voice shaking. "Michael was placed with a family when he was a baby, but they weren't good people. He came into the system 6 months ago when we removed him from an abusive situation. I've been his temporary guardian while we looked for a permanent placement." She looked at David with dawning understanding. The paperwork always seemed wrong, somehow. His birth records were incomplete, and there were inconsistencies in his medical history. But we never imagined. "We need to call the authorities," David said, trying to pull himself together. "We need to figure out how this happened, how to make this right." But Emma had already made her own decision about what was right. She had taken Michael's hand and was showing him how to make the ducks come closer to shore. "Don't worry," she was telling her newly discovered twin brother. Daddy's really nice, and we have a big house with a pool, and Mrs. Peterson makes the best chocolate chip cookies. You're going to love living with us." Michael looked uncertain but hopeful. "You really think I can stay with you?" "Of course," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You're my brother. Brothers and sisters belong together." Over the next several hours, phone calls were made, officials were contacted, and the slow process of bureaucracy began to turn. But as the legal wheels started moving to reunite Michael with his biological family, David sat on that park bench watching his children, both of his children, feed the ducks together. Emma chattered constantly, filling Michael in on 10 years of family history, telling him about their mother in heaven, about their big house, about all the things they would do together. Michael listened with wide eyes, occasionally asking quiet questions, slowly beginning to believe that he might finally have found where he belonged. As the sun began to set over Lincoln Park, Lisa officially transferred Michael into David's temporary custody pending the legal proceedings. The paperwork could wait. What mattered now was that a family torn apart by tragedy and error was being sewn back together by love and an 8-year-old girl's unshakable certainty about what was right. "Thank you," David said to Lisa as they prepared to leave the park.